common thought when it comes to remote work is, from a leadership standpoint, would be to control, control, control. What I found is the opposite.
You are expendable, and every single day in remote work, you just opened yourself up to 100 times more competition.
How do you become a remote work renegade?
Step right up, the jury's in, the courtroom of sales is set to begin. Truth on trial, hear the gavel groan. Let's lay the facts, don't go it alone.
Whether you're in marketing, sales, intake, or you own a firm, Under Oath cross-examines what it takes to be a successful revenue team. Let's welcome back to Defense our SVP of Revenue at Rankings. It's Zach Ramey. I'm Scott Knudson, the Senior Director of Sales Enablement here at Rankings. And then, of course, our ringer, Cole Casselberry, the VP of Sales at Rankings. Cole, how are we doing?
Man, I'm great. I think that's the tonality.
We got a great topic for today. Before we get into it, let me just get a gripe off my back. I was opening up my garage door opener, ran out of batteries the other day, and it just feels like everything should be AA's or AAA's. And when something isn't a AA or AAA, it just sets me off. It's one of these square D batteries for no reason. Why are we still using these dumb battery types? Did batteries rile you guys up like they rile me up?
I understand the frustration for when it does happen, but my garage door opener is on my phone, so I can't use too much. So Cole can probably gripe about it because his phone's never charged.
I was going to say, follow-up question. When something dies or a light bulb goes out, how long does it sit unchanged before it's changed? That should be the real question. No, I'm kidding. Garage door would be fixed immediately. Garage light bulb might be out for a minute.
Might be forever.
It might be a dark garage. It's all right, though.
If we want to jump into a heart session on Cole, we can do that. That'd be a whole podcast by itself.
This is really just
we don't have to.
An excuse to have an intervention for Cole not changing light bulbs.
Change your light bulbs, Cole. Got it. Noted. It's in there.
That light bulb already went out.
All right, gentlemen. If we've got nothing else to bring to the stand, let's get into court today. Court's now in session. The charge for today is around remote work. I call it remote work renegades. We've been able to operate at a pretty high level at Rankings, being fully remote. There is no office. That can be a challenge for a lot of companies. Some companies have been, forced to do that. They have some hybrid work, or they're deciding if they want to do it. And it can be a challenge, especially I think most of us have probably worked in an office more than we haven't worked in an office in our careers. And so I want to talk about, as we've had success over the last couple of years at Rankings, how have we modeled that inside of a remote world? What does it take to be kind of a world-class company, a world-class sales or revenue org in a remote setting? And obviously, we have kind of three unique lenses on that, being in sales, sales management, sales leadership. So that's the topic for today. How do you become a remote work renegade or a world-class team while also being remote? So that's the charge for today. To start off, we do what we call our opening statements. This is where we take a particular learning that we've had in our specific roles. So in my case, I'm in sales enablement. Something I've come to learn about remote work in my specific role recently. Zach, I want to start with you. As a revenue leader, you're on, I remember when you transitioned into your role and just the amount of meetings really upticked to a significant degree. I'm curious, you've probably felt this the most in some ways. What's something you've learned about remote work and maintaining excellence in that setting?
This is a fascinating conversation for me. I think that actually, unlike your opening statement, Scott, I have actually been in remote work most of my professional life.
You're the expert then.
Yeah, I don't know about that as much. I talk quite a bit about being obsessed with the job. You have to be such a self-starter from a remote company standpoint, or you have to be able to at least dictate your time appropriately. Because like you said, Scott, for me, I'm on most days Zooms 4 to 6 hours. And then that's probably light sometimes. It gets difficult, but you also have to be able to understand, be able to go take walks, get your workouts in, like be able to go out for lunch. Like you end up leaving the house for reasons you probably wouldn't have before. It's very difficult, but luckily I'm going into year 9 of working from home. I will also say and preface that for those of you who don't know, Cole and I are obviously in office together. Cole's also my best friend, and we've been working together 5 out of the last 8 years. We worked at the same company, so we're very fortunate. Some of the things I'm sure we're going to get into is about how hard it is not to be be in person with a lot of people. And luckily for me, I do get to work with one of my very best friend, and then somebody that we have gone through personal and professional life together. So that has made my remote work quite more enjoyable on my side.
The light bulb conversation is taking new meaning here as the listeners are learning.
Yeah, the reason why we can talk a little bit more about that is that we might know each other a little bit more than most.
Listen, that's for a B-side episode where we harp on me the whole time. We're talking about remote work here.
That's right. Cole, what about you? What's something you've learned? Obviously, you manage sellers, BDRs. You've been in this position for a while. What have you found in your role, or maybe a recent learning about remote work that would be some good wisdom for people in a similar kind of position?
A common thought when it comes to remote work is, from a leadership standpoint, would be to control, control, control. And what I found is honestly the quite opposite. The more autonomy that you give people to run their race, the more they actually show up because they feel valued in their abilities and decision to do so. Now you have to have a structure and a place and goals and minimum expectations, right? That's all necessities. But if you try to control every aspect of somebody's day to make them the most productive, it's usually a counter result to that, and they become less productive. When you give that autonomy, as Zach said, the autonomy to go out and take a walk, the autonomy to, go throw a ball with your kid for 10 minutes. I can't throw a ball with my kid. He's a year old.
Maybe kick a ball.
Yeah, kick a ball.
He can kick a ball.
He can kick a ball. But, just take those small moments. When you come back, you're very refreshed. You're ready to go. And I think that's at its core, something from leadership that I've learned is that side of things. Is the more autonomy I give people, the more they actually want to show up and do better work because they feel value in their own day.
Whenever I did go to an office, like I clocked in at 9, clocked out at 5, clocked out at 8, whatever. And at the end of the day, the job was done. I work at 8 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, like whenever I need to get the job done. Like if I want to take my son to a swim lesson at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, that's awesome, right? I get to do that. I get to structure my day up around that. So like, I think there are obviously a lot of pros and a lot of cons to anything, but in remote work, if done properly, it's a blessing in my mind that you can do. Like I said, we'll get into, I'm sure, how to build the team camaraderie from that standpoint, but from a personal standpoint, I get to be a husband and a father and a professional at all times. And learning to juggle all 3 of those things, I think, has been super rewarding, and it has made my relationship stronger, me a better husband, better father, just down the line.
In my particular role in enablement, this is advice I would give to anybody in enablement or in a similar kind of capacity, which is that it's really important to broadcast what you're doing, but it's all the more important to broadcast what you're doing in a remote setting. You need to communicate and over-communicate what you're doing. Because oftentimes in an enablement capacity, you are dealing with a lot of little one-offs here and there. You're fixing things, you're tech support, you're kind of that first line of defense. And you're kind of getting the weeds on that stuff. And the person that you might be working one-on-one with something with, they might be really appreciative, but nobody else sees that. Nobody else understands kind of the fires you've been putting out, right? And I think sales managers can appreciate this as well. The difference is with sales managers, a lot of other kind of sales-facing capacities, there's a number there. So as long as they're hitting the number, what you do in between, right? Like that's how it's measured, right? And on the enablement side, that's something that I've been working with on my team is saying, hey, you guys are doing a whole lot, and that's great. You need to make sure that's clear in a something like ClickUp or a project management solution, so people can kind of see what you're doing. but also celebrate your wins. Talk about what you've done. Make sure the people who are who are working directly with you and report to you and view our motion are like, oh yeah, I heard about this thing that Enablement did, or this thing that Sales Ops did, or whoever it might be. It's just really important, and it's all the more important in a remote setting where sometimes you in office you can see, I used to kind of run around from rep to rep, and it was really obvious when I was working on projects, and sometimes that could have been enough, but even then, whether you're in office or not, that's advice I would give to anyone in this kind of capacity, in a sales support capacity. Is one person might really get it, but like you really just need to find a good way to have a healthy way to broadcast and communicate what you're working on, how much time was involved, why it made an impact. That's just a healthy business practice. So,
Scott, I'll give your team kudos. At the end of the day, I know it's difficult for a sales enablement team because I think of it like a road crew that is always smoothing a road, right? There is nobody ever is like, man, this road is so smooth.
Right.
Like it just could, like you might say it here and there. I'm like, man, it's pretty smooth. All the time, like, man, this road. Now, if there were bumps for hours straight, you just wouldn't stop complaining about the bumps.
That's right.
Right. And for you and your team, I think it kind of, the complaints that Sales Enablement ever get, I think people lose sight of how smooth it was until you got to the bump. Because there's always going to be bumps, but you didn't see all the construction that we did to make sure that you were running smoothly for a while.
Such a good analogy and such a good tribute to the team, because it's definitely what it is.
It just feels like nobody sees that like we're 100 miles out, but the Sales Enablement team ran 100 miles forward and like, all right, let's start getting this road blade, right? That they're smooth, and then somebody hits a pebble, they're like, oh my God, the road's falling apart.
There's
and then
gravel. What are we doing?
Yeah, you got the construction crew coming back to smooth over that spot and head back 100 miles forward, right? Like, so Scott, kudos to your team, because I think that no matter what you do in life, there's always something to complain about, and that there's something always pops up. But at the end of the day, you and your team, I think, make our roads super smooth.
Absolutely.
And the bumps that happen, take care of so fast. So I hope your guys and gal listen to this podcast and know how proud we are of that team and what they do for us.
And again, I genuinely appreciate that. And this just speaks to it. Like we talk a lot about like, hey, here's what we're working on. It's important for Cole. We sync all the time. Zach, we sync all the time, to just always be talking about like, here's what I'm working on. Here's why I'm working on it. To always be offering, hey, like, what are you working on? Can I take anything off your table so that you can focus on these other important things, right? Sometimes people end up getting blinders on. They're like, well, I'm working on this battle card and that's all I'm going to work on. Working this one specific thing. And while it can be good, in some capacities to like knock off a project, in a remote world, like you have to be juggling lots of things at once, and a lot of that communication. So
we're going off a little off topic here, but it's okay, because it's a good thing to give kudos and things like that. Some people I don't think truly understand how good that they have it. I just was talking to another leader at a different company in sales, and he was walking through his account executives and things like that, and have to filter. He said that they use Zoom info and have to filter through their own list, and just what they pull is what they call and all this stuff. And I was like, you don't have a sales enablement team? And he's like, no. I was like, you don't have anybody like going through your list and making it better or sifting out the junk? And like, he's like, nope, I'm not. So I just think that sometimes, like, once you get in something, you just kind of lose sight of how good it is. And to our point, I think if you were in an office, you may see that a little bit more, because you're seeing those people. And like, if I'm sitting down in the lunchroom talking with Scott, hey man, what you working on today? I'm sifting through these 1,000 leads, right? Like those things just don't happen in that home setting. So I think it's good, because I've seen your team more lately, like kind of like almost like a breakdown of what we've done for the week, right? Like, hey, I just spent all this time getting this barrier out of the way for you all. Like you should be getting that. And I think that, again, to our point, for a remote setting, I think it's good to be patting your own back a lot of times, to be like, hey, I'm doing my job to make your job easier. If I don't say this, you would never know it.
Yeah. 100%. All right, now it's time to move on to what we call cross-examination. This is where we get a little more into the weeds on the topic. So again, we're talking about how to operate at a high level in a remote setting. We've made a handful of key decisions in a remote setting. There are some, uniqueness to the way Rankings does business, the way we kind of do things remotely, that I think are interesting. And I think at least in my capacity, seeing that contrast. I've worked at a couple companies where we had remote or hybrid or whatever, and often there's this, they can't quite get it right. It's, eventually I was like, let's just get everybody back in the office, right? They just can't seem to get over the hump. I want to kind of drill down on some of these things, kind of get your guys' take on some decisions you guys have made, leadership decisions, things that you prioritize, as we kind of get to the heart of this. Cole, I want to talk to you. You work a lot with reps in a remote setting. What's some wisdom you've learned when it comes to coaching, when it comes to, maintaining kind of a boss to rep relationship in a, you can't just go and, hey, let's go get lunch together or whatever. Like, you don't get some of that. How do you maintain that balance? What's something you've learned in a remote setting that's valuable there?
Yeah. So I can speak to the team that I work with today, because in every role that I've been in remote wise, it's been different, right? Different capacities of selling, different teams, different mindsets. But the team today, what I found that works from a coaching level and just a relationship level is understanding what my reps want, which is obviously to be the most impactful with their day. So that means making sure when I'm booking a meeting, it's a meeting that brings impact to their week or their day versus just a meeting that could have been an email. That's one thing that it took a minute for me to realize is I thought, man, meeting. We got to stay in front of each other. We got to talk every single day for half an hour as a team. Otherwise, how do we stay with this? And the learning I took from that is more impactful meetings on the calendar actually made us run that much harder. So that was the first thing. And I also think the second piece is intentional time individually. We do one-to-ones. It's not an uncommon thing, but I think the way I like to run one-to-ones is this is an AE's time or BDR's time. They bring their needs to the table and set the tone for that meeting. I have my agenda that I want to cover, but ultimately this is their time to hash out a grievance or a problem or talk through some great wins or get strategy sessions, but they get to control that outlook of that meeting. And that allows our time to be very intentional and very productive versus me always controlling every narrative and controlling what their conversations will look like. So those are two big key learnings I've learned through my career in leadership in a remote environment.
I like that. I want to zoom in a little bit on the meetings there. Zach, I know recently we made, a handful of more drastic, I don't know if drastic's the right word, but more extreme changes around meetings. I'd love to talk to you about, what were we doing and what did we change and why?
Yeah. It's definitely drastic, I guess, could be a good word to use for it. So for me in my role, I had multiple people that I was doing one-to-ones with, weekly, 4 or 5 people, that was taking 4 or 5 hours. At that point, we were also having multiple, leadership calls. And we alluded to it, or Scott, you alluded to it on a call, on a podcast, the previous weeks, is that I like to have everybody involved typically on meetings. So I really don't have a lot of meetings that not all my leadership team's not on it in some capacity. So it just felt like in our meetings that we were having, things were being said over and over again on multiple, just different titles of meetings. And the same thing was happening like on one-to-ones, is a lot of things that was being discussed needed to be brought up on that meeting with everybody, which was making it, again, just felt very repetitive, and it was taking up hours weekly. So I actually moved my one-to-ones off the calendar, and we moved a couple meetings and ended up just having one revenue leadership team meeting and extended that time out. Everybody gets coaching in front of each other. I think it's good for people to see that. Obviously, if something is dire, and I would never belittle somebody on a call or need to go at them, or for, if it was a write-up or something like that, that would be a one-off situation. But common coaching, things like that. I think it's best for people to learn from other people in those settings. And a lot of things where we do go cross department, I think it's good for people to hear the questions that's being asked, and also hearing my thought process on why the decision is being made. And then if you back up, a lot of things in those one-to-ones that was being asked, Cole would come to me and say, hey, like I want to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm not sure how you want to approach these marketing things. Like, well, you need to go get with Ken about that. Now Cole's having to get off that call and go message Ken, who's our VP of marketing. Well, now Ken's on the call already, right? Ken knows that he needs to get with Cole after this call. So like it just took out a layer of outreach that needed to happen. I am available 24/7 with my team. You know, it doesn't, I still connect with everybody on a one-to-one basis and am free as they need me to be. But it just felt that we got a free 4 or 5 hours a week, and we moved much faster because we moved lines of conversation that didn't need to be happening. I know this is a long-winded answer, but it's so much thought process went behind to why we made that decision. And honestly, I couldn't be happier with how it's gone. It does feel like we've become more efficient. Anytime I can take away a Zoom meeting, that is a good thing right now for what we do, to be able to put our heads down and do the work that needs to be done. And also it makes people feel like they're more involved. And I think anytime you can have your leadership team, or anybody for that matter that reports to you or to the company, to understand the reason, the why behind we're doing something, is super vital to what we are doing here personally and the way I operate.
I think that's such a great point about the specific piece about being involved, especially in a remote environment. You are siloed, right? Like I'm fortunate to be able to go speak to Zach in person because we live very close, but I don't get that with everyone. So being involved in those discussions and hearing that creates that camaraderie, and also does make us grow and learn and understand different departments. So I'd say for that specific change, it's really impacted our leadership crew a lot. And I think we move better and faster and stronger because of it.
We had a meeting this morning, actually, and it was something you touched on, Zach, happened in that meeting where somebody asked a question about a sponsor, saying, hey, you know, maybe we might want to, you know, offer up the sponsor to somebody else. And your initial reaction was like, no, that doesn't make any sense at all. Like, no, we shouldn't do that. Like that sounds crazy. Right. And you got to kind of hear this kind of, peeling back the curtain a little bit of like, I wouldn't have never known that your position or Chris's position or whatever on the particular issue, like kind of was this way. It felt like a conversation that might've just happened individually. Right. Because it happened in front of all of us, it like kind of recontextualized the sponsor and the event and the thing. Right. And that helps inform other decisions that we're going to make, maybe not immediately right now, but now have better context into other decisions that might ultimately kind of cross paths later down the road. And so I think you're dead on. I think that there is maybe some hesitancy to be like, oh, well, like nobody cares about their business, or, you know, questions that this person has don't apply. And I just think, yeah, I think you said it right. It's like, no, the better you understand what other people are doing, why they're asking questions, how I answer their questions, and what I care about, right? Especially as a leader who has to make, you know, big decisions and kind of give the reasonings why, or, you know, make hard choices, right? When you get to see that, even outside of your own, you know, capacity in a group setting, I just think it's so valuable. And it's something that I think can be a nice trade-off. Whereas in an office, maybe you would lean towards, hey, like we'll just meet individually because we're all here and we can talk in the hallway or whatever. But this just allows that everybody to come together and say, hey, listen, we might be talking about a specific issue, not in your lane, but it's helpful for you to hear how we're dealing with these problems.
I think it's a great point, Scott. For me, if we were in an office, you get to know people, you get to see their thought processes, you get to see how they act. They humanize themselves, right? And to what you just said, just about our call this morning, I want people to see how I come to a conclusion, right? Like I'm thinking about this live, like you said, pulling back the curtain. And I think that's how you get other leaders to become better leaders and understand how you think. Because then what happens is you start asking yourself, whether it's Zach or Cole or Chris or whoever, that's how he would approach this. Like last time this got brought up, this was the pathway that led to the answer.
Right.
So you start thinking like that. So I think you're not only, in my case, saving time throughout the week, you're growing your leadership, right? And now guess what they're going to do? They're going to grow their people under them the same way, because it's a trickle down effect. So I think a lot of times, like people get so nervous about letting go of control or not having certain time set aside, when in reality, like people learn from watching other people. Like if I didn't do it this time, and I could watch it from Cole, well, like, his mess up in this, or Scott or whatever. Like at the end of the day though, but you're understanding why, and now you won't make that mistake.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I think about it like sports. Like what I was on a high school team that won multiple state championships, and I got to watch people get scolded in practice and stuff. I'm never doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like, and you got to hear coaching happen live.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way about what we do now is people get to watch coaching happen live. They also get to hear me say, like, I was wrong live. And again, that's that humanizing part that if you were in an office, I feel like you'd get to see more often. And I'm just trying to bring that more to a Zoom setting or a remote setting, per the topic, and let people, pass that down. And then that's how you get that buy-in from a company standpoint, not just a few people.
Yeah. To that point, Cole, in the vein of humanizing, right? Like building relationships remotely. I think it's a pretty common notion is like, at least in sales, like a sales team is like, oh, you can't really replicate that sales floor, that in-person sales floor, like that's one of a kind. There's no way to replicate it. Right. And perhaps there's some degree of that, maybe some of the relationships you build there, it's easier, it's quicker or whatever. But, we, just this morning, our director of business development said that, we had an 89% show rate for our outbound team, which is like phenomenal. So clearly, you're able to have a team operating at a high level. Is the culture, the camaraderie, is that just sacrificed? Can you still have it? What does that look like? Like what have you seen there?
I'm a huge culture person. I think it really dictates how fast you can grow and the buy-in you can get. It starts with the leaders and how they show up, right? I'll tell a quick story, and I shared this with Zach the other day, and it's always humbling to hear nice things about myself. But our director of business development, when she first came in, she'd always say a line to me that was always great to hear, which was like, I'm learning from the best. And she was reflecting to me, and while I might not feel the best, that was a great sentiment. We promoted a team lead that's under her, and I was on a 1-to-1 with him, and he said, well, I'm learning from the best. And he's now reflecting to Jackie, right? So it starts with the leadership, and that passes down, and that buy-in goes down to the team leads, then to the AEs and the BDRs and the reps. So I think that's the first thing, is the people you have in seat and the buy-in they have. And Zach talks about it a lot. The obsession with their work translates to other people. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, again, just intentional time to get to know people on a human level. People probably didn't know I don't change my garage light bulbs. They will now, right? It humanizes me. But at the same time, like we take a really intentional approach to make sure our people are happy at work. Because if they're happy at work and they have a great home life, production goes up a lot. And that's not the ultimate goal, but we are at a sales company to drive results. So culture is a huge component of scaling a team. And the way you do that in a remote setting is by being intentional with how you communicate the goals, making sure there's a clear understanding. And I think that's the biggest piece. If people know their goals and there's a clear understanding of what their job does, and they have the autonomy to go do it, as I said earlier, they typically do that. It's when people are unclear about expectations, or there's inconsistent views between leadership. The way Zach communicates is fortunately the way I communicate, is fortunately the way Jackie communicates, is fortunately the way Carson and Tyler communicate. And it's the same trickle-down effect that creates a really unified vision for the way we do things.
Obviously, the people matter. You guys have kind of touched on this. Is hiring in a remote setting the same? Are you just always, hey, just always look for killers no matter what? Are you looking for anything differently when you're looking to hire remote people? Obviously you want people who are competent and good at the job, but are there other attributes that stand out as like, hey, this person would work well in this kind of environment? Zach, I'll start with you.
So I want to preface this though, that we're very blessed in the position that we got put in for the reason that we built this team basically from scratch. Scott, you alluded to earlier that you've been at companies in the past that went in office to home, that this ain't working in office. what I would correlate that to, because a lot of companies did that, and that was unfortunately because of COVID, right? That was out of necessity. But a lot of companies try to go to remote, and it fails for them. And what I'll compare that to is be like having an NFL team and say next year we're going to play in the NBA, right? And we're going to perform. No, most NFL teams wouldn't do too well in the NBA. And the reason for that is you have to hire for the situation that you're in, for the climate that you're in. Some people need to be beside somebody in an office. Some people are self-starters, obsessed with the job, that they can do that at home. They can, in my case, have my wife there, have my son there, and be able to go into an office and shut that door and stay and do that, right? Like, there's so many things that go into that. And the reason why I say we're blessed is because we got to build from scratch with people we already knew excelled in that environment. So we got to go build that team with it in mind that we are going to be remote at all times. And so to your question, Scott, like, you do look for certain things. Like, at the end of the day, it would be hard for me at this point to hire somebody that had zero work from home experience, right? Like, I would need to know that you can be an exceptional work from home person with a track record of that. This isn't an entry level role. And unfortunately or fortunately, our company is not an entry level work from home position. So I think that is probably one of the most important things we look at is had they had success at prior company from a remote setting. Because again, some people just need to be in an office setting. Yeah. And I think it's super vital.
Cole, what about you? When you're looking to hire BDRs, AEs, you're in a lot of those conversations. Are there any of the things that stand out to you as like, okay, like these two candidates, otherwise equal, but this one rep kind of had this particular thing, this might give them the edge.
We do something pretty unique at rankings in the hiring process, and we start the interview process off with something we call a one-way, which is where we send questions to a candidate ahead of time. They self-record their answers solo. They have 5 questions and they record those answers, and we get to observe that component of things before we even have that conversation. Now, it's not the end-all judgment of things, but it definitely carries a lot of weight into the remote environment. How do you show up on camera? When you are not in front of somebody, how do you react to questions that sometime are off base? To example, we used to have a question that was, what kind of tree would you say you yourself are? Most people start off that question with, I've never been asked that before. And that was on purpose, right? Because you get to see how somebody responds. But fortunately for us, we get to observe how people are remote before we're even into the conversation with them. So that starts off the whole process there. And then absolutely in any situation when I'm looking at salesperson or BDR, I'm looking for conversationalists. We are surrounded by excellent coaches and trainers. I can train people on how we do what we do. I can't train you on how to be you, though. So I always looking for people who can make me smile, make me like them on an interview process. Because if you can make me like you in 30 minutes and you can sell yourself, you can likely sell what we're doing, because it's a really hard thing to do in such a short amount of time. So
I want to touch on what Cole just said in the beginning about the one way, because you learn so much about people. And actually, I'll even back up. You will be shocked how many people don't do the one way. Mm-hmm. We have so many people that apply that we send the one ways to, and they don't do it. And for me, I've talked about it a ton, and it's something I care deeply about. I call it selective professionalism. You learn a lot about somebody's selective professionalism when they're in a situation that is very comfortable to them. You have no idea how many people record their one ways with an unmade bed in the background, and they will come on just in a Yankees t-shirt, right? Like they are so a couple, or they have to pull guy on just a cell phone, just crazy stuff. But you truly get to learn how these people operate in this comfortable setting. And that tells us so much about somebody. That when somebody gets on in a high def camera and they're super buttoned up, you're like, okay, like the professionalism is it all to my, like, I want to take this to a Zoom meeting, right? Like, and then there's some people who turn on that they have great answers, but the professionalism is bottom of the barrel. And you're like, unfortunately, that just doesn't do it. So I really wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, I want to shout out, my sales enablement manager, because I think I got an interesting insight into that as it was happening. We had a lot of great candidates for the sales enablement position, and I knew he was like out camping, and he got sent the one way, and he essentially got in his car, drove to the closest store he could find. There was like a Marshall's or something like that. Just got a nicer shirt, went to a place that was more professional, got his laptop out, recorded it, did it all there, sent it. And then I had other people, this was like on a Friday or something like that. And then other people like, oh, we'll get to it on Monday, like we'll get around to it. And so it was this interesting lens where it's like, he chose like, yeah, it's the weekend, I'm camping. I could wait, but instead I'm going to like spend $15 on a shirt. I'm going to get somewhere nice. I'm going to record now. When I talked to Zach, it really sounded like immediacy was important to him. Turns out it's really important, right? And that ended up being a big difference maker for him, right? He was able to just operate. And it's like, yeah, if in this remote setting, right, like those little tells of like, how did you prioritize this? What did you do? Yeah, you just mentioned like, are you just on your phone? Are you taking it seriously? Or have you thought about it? Are you composed? Are you likable? You can tell a lot about that. And I love the way that it's this first layer of like, hey, like this is just to set the stage, right? Like, do you show up in this way? If you show up in this way, great. Now let's talk about your skills. Let's converse. Let's have you win me over, whatever.
I think it speaks to a lot of person, honestly, their character, right? And what I compare this to all the time is if you had a video camera on, if I think something that tells a lot about somebody is if I could watch you when you go to the grocery store, what do you do with the car?
Right.
That's what I compare it to. It's a pretty day out. It's not crap and rain outside. Like, having to run, do whatever. Like, do you take your car back and put it in the holder? Like that tells me a lot about a person. Right. And I feel the same way about kind of our one ways. It tells me a lot about their character. Are they able just to push something off? Like, you're going for a job. This is when you should be the most on ever. And you're able to push this off 2-3 days. No, I don't care if it's the weekend or not. Like, you're wanting a new job. You should be putting your best foot forward, and your best foot forward is, I'll get to it on Monday.
Right.
It's probably not that big hire in my mind.
In office setting, there's a little bit of a culture shift where it's like, hey, you work 9 to 5, and then once 5 comes along, you go back to your life. If that's the culture that you want, if that's the kind of business you want to run, that's great. Some people that is what they're looking for, and that is the kind of system that they want. In a remote setting, it seems like the message I'm hearing, and I think is what we would put forth is like the remote settings work best when you give extreme autonomy, but also you say, hey, when work needs to be done, work needs to be done, right? And your ability to, we talk about being obsessive and caring about it, right? I laugh because I'll be doing something at 10 o'clock and I'll be like thinking about this list I have to build, and I'll be like, I'm just gonna like, before I go to bed, like I'm just gonna like do a quick thing, because it's like my business now. It's like I own this part of it, and like, yeah, I could wait until Monday or whatever when I'm like logged in, but it's like, no, it needs to be done, so I'm gonna go do it, right? And you want to find people who that's the way they think. If they're more inclined to be like, you have me when you have me, and you don't when you don't. That can work for some places, but I think in a remote setting, you really want to find people who have, I would say, a different perspective on that and are willing to be more flexible with their time. It's a great trade-off. Yeah, like as you said, Zach, it's like, hey, I'm going to go, I'm going to go with my son. I'm going to go do a swim lesson at 3 p.m, right? Like, I'm going to do this, right? Like, you earn that privilege. But then, there's a trade-off there. So, yeah, I think. But
I'll also take that meeting at 6 p.m., 7 p.m. at night because of my Eastern person,
right?
Or my Pacific person, or whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure you guys, you deal with that, a lot, especially as the company gets bigger. It's like, that's right, they're in freaking Oregon and I'm in New York. Like, yeah, I guess that's going to be a 5:30 meeting for me. I'll be a little bit late to dinner, right? It doesn't happen every night, but like that just kind of goes to show culturally, like, hey, like. I'm in it.
But the nice thing is that day that I have that 6 o'clock meeting, I make sure I do lunch with my wife and my son that day.
Right.
Right. Like, cause I'm not going to be able to do dinner tonight the way we normally do. So I'm going to ensure that I've set up my day to grab lunch with you, right? That's the trade-off. That's what makes it so special. Mm-hmm. That also is that extreme ownership that I do what it takes to get the job done. That's something we talk about quite often. Do what you want to do. Be on the meetings you're supposed to be on. All we care about is the job being done and us winning at the end of the week. Yeah, right. That's what you're going to be held accountable for at the end of the day. Yeah.
Love it. All right, let's move into our objections part of the episode. This is going to be where we take a modern convention around the idea, in this case, working remotely, and we challenge it. We object to it, something that otherwise might be thought of like, oh, that's just the way that it is, and we object to it. I'll start us off. I think that there is this idea, and we talked about it a little bit, that you just can't build the same kind of culture or friendship or relationship remotely that you can in person. And I object to that. I think it can be different the way that you go about it, but I've made remote friends, and I do think that like one of the differences is like you do need to have some capacity to meet up in person. I think for us, it's a couple times a year whether it's an event or whatever, just having that one quick human meeting makes a pretty big impact, a pretty big difference, but that can actually go quite a ways. And so I just think that sometimes it can feel like, oh, I'm just on this island. I don't know anybody. I can't really build relationships the way that I can. I think you want to look for, if you're looking for remote work or you have a remote situation, I think as long as there's a handful of circumstances where you can meet your team in person, even if it's for a weekend or for a couple of days or an event, as long as you're getting that, I think you absolutely can build the same kind of culture, build the same kind of relationships that you have in office. Obviously, some of those things can come a little bit quicker and a little bit easier in office, but I just don't think that it's one or the other. Like you just don't get to have work relationships that, in a remote setting. I think you absolutely can. As long as you have the right, levers in place to make sure that thing can, those relationships can flourish and that culture can be there to flourish. Because I think that's the other really important part of it, right? Like once you meet your team in person, you have a dinner with them or whatever, everyone's humanized. You understand everyone's position all the more. You understand those little idiosyncrasies that they're like in real life or in person. And that just, it makes you want to show up that much more for them, makes you want to stop what you're doing to help somebody else, right? Like, so as long as you're just getting a little bit of that, it can go a long way. So that's my objection. Cole, I'll move to you. What's an objection you have in the world of remote work?
I'm gonna get controversial here.
I like it.
It's my rub a feather, but I think, especially in the remote environment, the space you're in matters to your productivity. The remote can be work from anywhere. Speaking for myself personally, I have to have a space that I can just focus. I have to have an office or a dedicated space. I could not be as effective doing my job on the couch in the living room as I am in my office, in my environment, one that makes me comfortable. And having that space that you go to be productive and get work done doesn't mean you can't go outside every once in a while and do those things. But I think having a dedicated space to get your job done is a necessity in a remote work environment, to really be at the top of your game and the most productive.
I like that. That was something I'd learned before. These guys tease me because I work out of my closet. And I ultimately I tried working downstairs. I tried working in an armchair or whatever. And I wasn't able to get kind of that separation. So I have like a little walk-in closet and I took out all of my clothes, put them in a dresser and put my desk in my closet. And I'm able to close the door and work inside of a room, still has a window and AC, but I think being in a space, walking into a space where it's like, this is my workspace. Sometimes, you can take a meeting out and about if you need to. There are exceptions, of course, but I think you're dead on, Cole. Like making sure you have a space in the remote setting is really important. Zach, what about you? What's your objection to remote work?
We'll see how well this one lands. Mine might not be even a little bit more than Cole's. I think that if you're a fully remote company, you should be held to a higher standard than if you were in office.
Interesting.
And what I mean by that is you do have the autonomy to work whenever, and you do have the autonomy to do what you want, essentially, when you want. You should be held to a higher standard that job gets done. Then there are certain things that in office that you clock in, clock out. There's only so many hours to get certain things done. I think if you get awarded the freedom of working from a remote setting and you get the autonomy to do what you want, then you should be held to a higher standard. There should be no budging. Job gets done no matter what.
Yeah,
I'm aligned.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes I think the mistake that people fall into is they're saying, hey, we're going to operate the exact same with the same expectations and the same rules and the same meetings. We're just going to do it remotely. And they're two different things. And I think you nailed it on the head, Zach. The moment we say, hey, we're fully remote, what that means is I'm giving you tons of autonomy. I can't see what you're doing. I don't know what you're doing, right? I'm trusting that you're gonna get this work done. Now that might mean that you get it done at midnight, right? If that's when you hit that's how you gotta, power through in this particular thing or whatever, right? But yeah, I think to your point, in exchange for the autonomy, right? Not every company can work remotely. It is a privilege, right? There are plenty of companies like, hey, we wish we could, but we have these elements. It's just not going to work, right? The trade-off is there's a higher expectation. You're going to have situations like, I cook most of the time for my family. I make breakfast. I often will make lunch, and I usually make dinner, right? That's rarer. That situation can happen, right? But because I have that freedom, the expectation for me to make sure that my sales teams are enabled, that the people who report to me are executing at a high level, it's there, right? And I think about what they're doing and make sure that they're operating at a high level, and I communicate with that constantly, right? I can't just be like, hey, I'm going to let it ride. Hope you guys figure it out. I'm going to do my thing. It's like, you have to be able to jump in and out of that intensity really quickly. So yeah, I think you're dead on, Zach.
To the point we made earlier about your team, about kind of laying the road, right? Making it smooth, and you don't really feel bumps that often. So when you do, it's like the end of the world's coming. I think it's in the same sentiment that it's so common now to be remote that people lose sight that it's a privilege to work remote. How uncommon that has been throughout life.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah.
And nowadays people do have the opportunity to do what you just said, Scott, that you can make breakfast, lunch, and dinner for your family, that I can take my son to 3 o'clock swim practice, right? Like, people lose sight that owners and people are allowing that to happen, that you should treat it just like it's your company, just like your business. And you should have that extreme ownership, that it's a privilege to be able to do those things, and you should deliver day in and day out because of it.
Yeah. 100%. All right, we're going to wrap up the episode. Closing arguments. This is really just a pithy, short takeaway. If we were to summarize a point we've made or something we've kind of come to in this episode about remote work, the episode, I've called it Remote Work Renegades. How do you operate at a high level in a remote setting? What's the important thing to remember in remote work? Cole, we'll start with you. In a remote setting, what's one last thing you want to leave with the Under Oath listeners?
Yeah, this is a common saying, but I think it's very impactful to remote work, which is control your controllables. And that's what you have to come in and do every single day when you're in a remote environment. As Zach and we all said, it is a privilege. So that means you have to come in every day and control what you can control. That means showing up and putting in the activity, getting the job done, being intentional with what you do. So you have to show up and control your outcome of your day. So control your controllables. I didn't coin that one, but it's
the first time. I'm pretty sure it's the first time anyone's said that. So we're going to attribute that to you, Cole. No, I
take it back. I coined that one. It's the first time you've ever heard it.
I like it. No, I think it's you can get lost a little bit and feel kind of overwhelmed. It's like, listen, as long as you're focused on what you can control, a lot of things will sort themselves out. I think you're dead on. I'll say something similar, which is basically, what are you doing differently to ensure the success in a remote setting, right? If what you're doing is what you would be doing in an office setting, you are going to fail, right? And so you need to have a really clear understanding of here's what I'm doing differently. A lot of that's going to be things like over communicating, building relationships with people, spending the extra time. Zach, one thing that I know you do a lot is you say our founder has a podcast. It's like, you should be listening to his podcast all the time. Have it just on in the background, right? There are all these things you should be doing that maybe in person you'd be able to hear him talking and giving, company meetings or whatever, right? Stand-ups, you aren't getting any of that. So it is incumbent on you to involve yourself and to invest yourself in the business that you're selling, right, in a remote setting. So evaluate what you're doing and being like, okay, what am I doing in a remote setting that will set me up for success that I wouldn't be doing in an office setting? And so just be really aware of that. Zach, we'll give you the final word here. What's something you leave with the Under Oath listeners?
I think it's might be hard for some people to hear, and it took me a little bit in my professional career, especially in remote work, to understand it, is you are expendable. And every single day in remote work, you just opened yourself up to 100 times more competition than you would be if you were in office, because somebody has to be local. They got to be able to come there. They have to want to drive into work every day. When you're remote, opportunity is endless. It's up to you to make yourself expendable every single day. And I think people lose sight of that they think that I can skate by because nobody's watching me. You should feel like you have more eyes on you than ever in remote work.
100%. Yep. It falls on you. It's a privilege, comes at a high cost. The results matter all the more. Under Oath listeners, we appreciate you tuning in. And if you have any thoughts or feedback from the show, you have an idea you want us to talk about, or you yourself are a part of a revenue engine, you're building a revenue engine like we are, we'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to talk about something that you're working through as well. That's going to do it for Under Oath today. Court is now closed.